Welcome back to the podcast. Solo podcast today, so I do not have a guest. I wanted to run through what I've learned so far in creating this podcast and actually podcasting as a CEO. So those of you who don't know, I'm a CEO in the construction industry, and I wanted to talk about kind of why I did this, why I started it, and what I've learned up to this point, being 19 episodes in. So this is actually episode number 19. I only had one other solo pod inside of this. So, 17 of them being with guests. And this is kind of what I've learned so far and what I kind of wish I knew before I started. And, we'll go through some of that. So, I want to start out with things to think about before you start. So, if you're going down a road and you're thinking, like, man, I kind of want to start a podcast, I think it would be helpful for either your brand, your work, connection, whatever the reason may be. I'm going to give you some of the reasons why I did it and what I've learned while I'm in the middle of it. So let's talk about things to think about before you start. So the first thing, the niche word. It comes up pretty much with all content. If you're thinking about it, think about how far down you want a niche or how wide you want to keep it. So for my specific one, I wanted to keep it pretty broad. I do have things that are related to work. I do have fellow employees on my podcast, which is very helpful. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But it's also pretty broad that I like talking to people about either their career, their passion. So it doesn't even have to be work specific. It could be something that you're passionate about in your personal life, because I love talking to people about passions, because it's really easy to come up with conversations, have a conversations when people are passionate about things. So if you want to get specific, if you want to talk specifically about leadership or about whatever, name the gamut, you can certainly niche down. Just realize when it comes to guests, that could get a little bit more difficult if you're staying in a certain genre or a niche that you're looking to really focus on. So the reason I wanted to stay wide open is really just around guests. I wanted to be able to have anyone and talk to anyone about almost anything, because that interests me. And I'll talk a little bit more about those specific things. So just realize, if you want to get specific, you can. You don't have to be as broad as I have gone with my specific podcast, but niching down is a perfect way to get a real specified audience, and can be helpful with growing as well. So I chose to keep it wide and talk to people about passion, stories, hobbies, because it usually is an easy conversation. I like learning things I don't understand or know about. Defining your why. So I didn't do this from the very beginning. I wish I would have, because what came up is I actually had a guest that I was going to have on ask me, why are you doing this? Or like, if I'm going to be on, I'd like to know like why you are creating this podcast. And I thought that was a fascinating question. And so what I would tell you is, before you start, think about your reasonings why you want to do it. When I dug into that more myself, and I was on another podcast, it made me really think about my why. And then I realized that this is a real outlet for me for learning. I truly do believe you can learn something from everyone that you meet. And this is kind of my way of proving that to myself and proving that to people who listen, that, we'll have stories of, the ability to have stories all over the spectrum. And with that, I get to learn about things that I do not understand or have very little knowledge of. And that opens me up to worlds that, I can understand more, not be so ignorant, and I'll learn different aspects of life that I just didn't know about, which is really exciting for me. So make sure you define that why. It can go right along with your niche and whatever you're defining as your podcast like focus area. But people will ask and guests will ask, so make sure you have that thought about. Doesn't have to be all nailed down. I didn't have mine nailed down from the beginning, but as I worked through it, I really realized it was about knowledge and spreading knowledge and learning things that I don't completely understand, and learning something from everyone. The other one you want to think about is expectation and consistency. Now, this one's tough. Because I made other content, I knew kind of what to expect here, and I knew what my time and my life would allow. So how, things to think about: how often do you want your episodes to drop? How much of a backlog of content? Working harder at the beginning, because you got to kind of build up that content. So I only drop one episode a week. So there's obviously plenty, like, Joe Rogan drops a podcast every day, but that's his full, one of his full-time jobs. I don't know how many full-time jobs he have, but, don't overcommit and underdeliver. So I knew I could get one podcast episode recorded per week. This is a perfect example where I'm doing this solo pod because I actually had two guests this week have to move their schedules to move the podcast because life happens. Totally cool. And that's usually when I drop in a solo pod because I want to make sure I stay consistent with recording one per week. Now, currently, I'm out about a month in content ahead of where I am right now. So I'm about 4 to 5 episodes ahead, but I want to make sure I'm always recording a single episode per week so I can keep that consistency of backlog. So something to think about there when you're going on vacation, if you're going to be gone for a week at a time or whatever it looks like, you're going to make sure your content's far enough ahead and you do have a backlog with that. So something to think about if you're going to stay really consistent and make sure that your audience expectation of whenever your episode is supposed to drop, that you have one available. So think about that. Don't just say yes to everything because your life can get pretty hectic. So let's talk about, is it worth it? Such a large question there. So I talked a little bit about this, but my podcast, why, and I want to make sure I cover my notes here. To me, it's a bit selfish of why I started the podcast. Couple of reasons. I'm not a big reader. I actually just recently started 2 book clubs at work, and that is to make sure I stay accountable to myself with reading new books and expanding my mind because I don't naturally like to read, but it's so necessary, and I don't think I've realized up until recently how necessary it is. So to me, this podcast is just another form of reading, which you may say, like, what do you mean? Well, whenever I'm talking to people about their stories or about their careers or anything like that, I'm learning, like I'm gaining so many banger quotes or unbelievable stories or just ways to look at things and improve my own life. And I'm pulling all of that out of these conversations. So, this is reducing ignorances every time I have a conversation or have a podcast episode with someone. And it doesn't matter what it's about. I'm pulling something out of all of those. That is another way for me to be able to read books, quote unquote, or gain knowledge without actually having to sit down and read a specific book. So that is helpful for me. And like I said, it is a bit selfish because I'm gaining information, but it's also helping with conversations and all that stuff. So the next piece of this is it's my why is connections. I don't think I wrapped my head around connections and the approach to connections up until about later last year when I read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. If you have not read that book, certainly check it out. But just connections, like it made me really open my mind on what they're possible, how to do them. I thought I was a good conversationalist, which was laughable because I'm not. And then that book really opened up my eyes to what that means. But with the connections, I'm learning from everyone, like I stated with the books. Connecting with coworkers. I've had 2 coworkers on the podcast so far. I plan on having a few more coming up actually. And what that's done is really had people at work listen to those episodes as well and then discuss those episodes either with myself or with the individual who was on. I also got to learn about hobbies of individual employees, which was really great, and talk about passions that are completely unrelated to work. But it also opens up conversations to have with that individual at work about things that they're really passionate about, which is great. I really like connecting with employees, on the level that's outside of work, and it's been really helpful. People will feel they know you as well, and more relatable with the podcast, especially if you're putting out on a platform like I put out an audio version, plus I put out a YouTube version, and then I post some things on LinkedIn and other socials. So people will get to know you. It's long form content. It's really hard to try to hide who you are, I would say. I don't know if that's the right way to say that. But the way you come across in long form content is kind of the way you are. That usually coincides with each other. It's very hard to stay locked into a mask for that long of a time period because some of these episodes, that I've been on have gone close to 2 hours or maybe over. So I do think long form brings out the type of person you are. So people will connect with that if they do listen to an entire podcast episode or they watch you or whatever that looks like. You will become more relatable, which I think is really powerful, especially in a CEO role, leadership role, or whatever role. That relationship being connecting with people is a huge piece, and that the podcasting has really helped with that. The other piece of that is future business opportunities, whether that be with a subcontractor or a contractor, like someone who can help your business or someone that you can help out or get work with. That's been really amazing to learn other businesses that maybe I've been aware, but not probably at the level that I completely understood, which was really amazing. So that's been extremely helpful just to open my eyes up to maybe individuals who could help our business, help me personally, help any of the employees, just broaden my horizons with the options that are out there for help or to alleviate problems or issues or whatever that looks like is problem solving. That is business pretty much every day. And that's been extremely helpful. So connection with business opportunities, future team members as well. You never know who's watching the content, even the stuff, you post on your socials or you're putting out there. You may have a team member who's looking to maybe come on board, and it could be a great way because I know construction, especially right now, it's really tough to find people. Everybody's going through a bit of that situation. So if you put yourself out there, once again, if you become relatable, especially in a leadership role, and people feel like they do know you because of your podcast or whatever that looks like, if you're putting out content in general, that could help you land that specific candidate, or maybe they reach out for that reason because they like the type of person you're portraying through the podcast and the way you talk to guests and things like that. I mean, it opens up a whole host of doors of just connection in general with people, which I think is really powerful. You also don't know what kind of connections you'll make, with future work. People, whether they listen to your podcast or they're a guest on that, it could be future opportunities and they may think of you. Like the big thing for me is trying to connect that, my podcast allows people to think like whenever they need steel, metal fabrication, mechanical, industrial installation, they're going to think of me maybe and think of SWF and the things we can provide and how we treat our people, how we lead just through the conversations to try to put in my perspectives when I'm talking to guests, whether it be in leadership or culture or anything like that, just me in general and our approach as SWF as a company and what we're trying to do. So, um, yeah. So connections, I think, is a massive piece of the podcast. And I didn't really put all that together at the beginning. I just was looking at I saw a bunch of people posting on LinkedIn about if I was this or if I was in leadership in construction, I would start a podcast and these are some of the reasons why. And I would read out through them. And some of the things that I'm expressing today are some of the things that I read. So I said, well, I've made videos in the past. I have YouTube, so I'm comfortable in the camera. I can create a structure. I can think about things. And I said, well, why not? And the other piece of this from a connection standpoint, which is a little bit selfish, kind of like the books, is I don't like going to mixers and social things and going to those types of events. They are not my thing. I will be the one in the corner staring at my phone because they're just very uncomfortable for me. So this gives me a way to still do some of that, but in a controlled atmosphere that I'm comfortable with. And in my role, I think that, I have to do some of that and I don't really enjoy that kind of social stuff. So this is my kind of alternative way to getting out there and speaking to people and speaking potential partners or any of that stuff is really helpful. And I'm using this as that avenue because I do enjoy learning things from people. I do enjoy connecting with people, just not so much in the traditional social sense, maybe. So it is an outlet for me there as well in the connections piece. So yeah. And once again, I chose the open policy of passions across the board because I do enjoy talking to people when they light up about their passions. So another piece, is it worth it, is become a better conversationalist. I have really honed in not only reading Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, but also honed in the skill of listening, active listening. I do come to the podcast with notes, but I have noticed that I'm really trying to get good at really staying in the conversation and pulling really interesting um, pieces out that maybe the guests will talk about and kind of expand on those and go down that and pull that string and try to go down that line. I'm a very structured person by nature. And so I want to stay with my notes and make sure I get to every question every time. And sometimes that's not good enough. So I'm really trying to focus in on staying in the conversation and really appreciating it and taking it all in and pulling strings that the audience or myself straight up would be like, oh, that's interesting. Let me talk about that. Let me ask about that. So I feel like I've really been honing the skills around active listening and then also being genuinely interested in other people. That's really the main gig of this podcasting. And it really allows me to dig in and research someone that's coming on, especially people that I don't know. I've had a couple of guests so far and more lined up of that I don't have a prior relationship with. So it's very exciting because I kind of dig into the LinkedIn, dig into the socials, find out about them, read about their companies and things like that. And if you do that on a regular basis, when you meet new people, it's pretty amazing when you show up and you're interested in someone else, how powerful that is. And I did not know that up until, before reading Dale Carnegie and then really understanding what that looks like. And it's just it's a powerful thing to be genuinely interested in other people. So if you struggle with any of that, I would say podcasting is a great way to hone that skill and really help with that. Once again, social skills that kind of goes along with it. Networking as well, like I talked about, just in conversations and understanding people and getting to know that. So, from the "is it worth it" concept, one, to me, learning. It's like reading books and learning from people all the time. Two, the connections piece, whether that be a partner, future work, future teammates, all that kind of stuff. You never know what you could get out of it or who's listening and trying to connect with you, and then becoming a better conversationalist and those skills that come with that. So I think those are three powerful worth it's. I'm not sure if that's the right phrase, but you get what I'm saying. The other piece of this as well, the last one is real on the promotional piece, promoting your people, promoting your company, promoting your personal brand, promoting all of those types of things, helping promote other people's stuff, being generally interested in other people and helping them promote their stuff, I think is just win-win-wins all around. If you look in a win-win scenario, that really is helpful just kind of to the whole gamut. And just the other piece of it is networking adjacent, once again, people feeling like they know you. I've had lots of conversations with employees about podcast guests or about podcast episodes. It's just an easy way to really connect with people internal to your company about subjects that you may have covered that aren't specifically work related. And it may lead into, oh, hey, I'm into this, I'm into that. And you get to really connect with your fellow employees and fellow teammates to understand what they like or what they're into outside of work, which is great. So the next thing I want to talk about is if you are thinking about starting and you're like, okay, listen, Brandon, this stuff sounds great. I'm into a lot of what you're saying here. Um, when I'm starting, what do I need? So I want to talk about some starting stuff. I will leave links down in the description. What I will say is I will leave my Amazon links. They are affiliate links because of all my other YouTube content stuff, I've signed up for affiliate programs for lots of things, just because you get a little extra bonus bucks if you use the link. Don't care if you do or not. I'm just telling you because I'm a honest person, that if you would use the link that is down in the description, just like my other content, when I make videos, I leave those links there as well because it's helpful. A small kickback. That's kind of it. So, from a starting perspective, I would say the things that you want to focus on having if you're really interested in this. And now I'm going to say this is from a video and an audio perspective. I think you should do both. I think it is powerful to have both. I know people who do just audio, and that's totally fine. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think you can hit a lot of social platforms if you have video as well. So this is going to cover, audio and video perspective. So first one, you're going to need a good microphone. I run a lot of Elgato stuff as a content space. Elgato has a lot of high quality stuff. So I do have a really nice Elgato mic. They have a newer version. I think this is like a Wave 3, but they have a newer version. And you also want a good microphone arm, this thing here. There are really cool ones that would come in from this direction or coming from the side. It's totally up to your desk or how your setup is. If you're going to be in person as well, if you can do podcast episodes that are actually in person and not virtual, that is a whole different scenario with a whole different lot of setups, and you'll need some mixers for the microphone to all plug into things. But that's all certainly possible. I'm talking more from the virtual space of what I'm using right now. A camera. I have an Elgato face cam camera that is connected to my computer. There's a million options as well for that. I would get a decent webcam though that you can adjust the settings, so you can adjust kind of saturation and all that kind of things, because you don't want it to be super bright. You want to make sure that you can kind of hone that in and dial some of that in outside of the box settings. So I would say with the webcam, make sure you get one that comes with maybe some programs that you can download that you can adjust some settings so it doesn't look awful or bright or anything like that, because if it's audio, it won't make a difference, obviously. But if you're doing video, people are probably going to click off if it's not satisfying or annoying to watch. So something to think about there. Headphones, absolutely necessary. You can also get headphones that have a microphone in them, so you can kill two birds with one stone. That's totally cool as well. I've just always gone with the 2 option. This does have a microphone as well, but these are kind of like for gaming for me more than, but they work for podcasting. They're hooked up to my computer. So a good set of headphones. They don't have to be super fancy. They don't have to be ridiculous and red and black and camo and all that stuff, but get a good set of headphones because it's important to make sure that you're not getting a lot of background noise. Or, when you're podcasting, if you have it coming through your speakers, I had this happen with multiple guests where my voice was coming through their speaker, which was then coming through the microphone because they have not enough settings on their microphone to, kind of stop that noise background situation. So make sure you have a good set pair of headphones so you don't have any problems with speakers and everything like that. Lighting. These two guys, I have Elgato Air lights here that are hooked up to my computer that are then hooked up to my Steam Deck. So I have that set up that they're all push buttons. That's really, once you set up your lights, you don't have to get that fancy. You can have simple lights, a simple lamp, whatever that needs to look like, that it's just facing your light. Just make sure you have good lighting on your face. And be considerate of your background as well. You can see I have some lights going on there with lighting in the back. That's mostly because this is my kind of game room, podcasting, YouTube room, and I spend a lot of time in here. So I like having my lightsabers around and all that good stuff. But consider the lighting. Most important is on your face, and you can have a little bit in the background if you need. There's plenty of YouTube video and explanation videos out there on like how to make a good background for blah 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 blah, and they'll give you lots of tips and stuff like that. Because I wouldn't say mine is perfect, but I like it and it's working so far. So lighting on the face, most important. Background, like we just talked about. Software. So I'm currently using Riverside. I'll also leave that link because I have an affiliate link with them, and I am very happy with Riverside, actually. I didn't know what I was getting into. I've watched a couple of videos before I ended up getting the subscription, and I knew when I was going virtual, I didn't want to use Teams or anything like that. The thing I love about Riverside is it downloads locally. So even if your internet is a bit janky on either side of the podcast, it'll download locally and then it'll upload to Riverside directly. So it should be a clean version. So that's what I always tell the guests before I start the podcast is I really talk to them about, hey, even if it looks horrible and grainy, like, don't worry, keep going. I can always either edit it later or don't worry, the local file will upload and it should look clean. So I've been very happy with Riverside. I do like their editing software. Their editing software is pretty decent as well on the program. Their ability to kind of pull AI short clips is great as well for, shorts or reels or anything like that. So they have a tool that does an auto find of popular times or popular topics. You can also do that all manual inside. They have audio cleaning and things like that. I don't use that as much because I noticed it does get a little like, I don't know, like sharp at times with some of the auto stuff. But other than that, it's been really successful. I really enjoyed Riverside from a recording standpoint. You can certainly start out with Teams or Zoom or whatever that looks like if you want to. It's just that it won't provide you with that clean upload kind of afterwards. At least I don't think it does. That's why I enjoyed Riverside, because I wanted to make sure even with bad internet connections, I could get a good feed, because that's kind of the worst if someone has a bad. So don't expect everyone's going to have a good internet either, because not everybody does. Editing software. So outside of just the podcasting and recording software, I've had multiple times where the guests had very low voices. And Riverside will adjust that and clean some of that up, but to me, it's still sharp and it doesn't sound right. So I actually export that and take it into DaVinci Resolve. I do have DaVinci Resolve experience through my YouTube editing, and then I would adjust the volumes in there and then use that and download that file. So I just take both raw video files from Riverside and I line them up inside of DaVinci Resolve. I adjust those volumes. I crop the video size as well, because they come in full screen, and then I crop them, put them side by side, and then I export that as its own video file. So realize you may need some outside editing software abilities as well to adjust volumes, because some people, won't use microphones or will use their internal microphone inside the laptop, all that kind of stuff. You may have to adjust volumes for them. Form to get guests. This is easy. Just use Google Forms. If you've never used Google Forms, there's lots of videos out there on explain how to do it. But Google Forms is a great way to allow people to sign up for the podcast without you having to physically ask them. I've had people that have actually sent me a message and asked to fill out the form, and I've had people fill out the form just totally openly without me even asking, which is great. So it allows you to collect guests without having to actually do a lot of the work. I've only had a couple so far. I'm only obviously episode 19 that have signed up without me asking, but it's also a great way to collect information that you want for the podcast. For instance, how to contact them with an email, maybe what they want to talk about, social things that you can promote for them. So you can gather all that information, some questions, so that you don't have to do it later. It'll come and if you've never used Google Forms, you can send it to Excel and it'll keep it in a nice uniformed fashion, and then you can just go right across through the different columns and the answers that they gave you. So Google Forms is really great to make a guest form and collect all kind of the pre-podcast information that you may need to talk about when you're in there. So it's pretty great. The last thing I would say from a what you need before you get started is also a link tree. If you've never used Linktree, it's a way to, and I have the free version, so you don't even have to buy the pro version. And it's just a way to collect all of your different socials where people can find you in one link. So you can customize it. So I have mine broken up into like the podcast section and the rest of my socials, which has some of my other YouTube stuff and LinkedIn. But Linktree is a great way to have one link that you can put in all of your different social things that cover all of your different social media. So if you have multiple, Linktree is a great way to have a single link to all of them. So that's kind of all the starting stuff that I could think of. For like format or having notes and everything, I just use Google Docs, and then I upload it into Riverside into the script section. When I'm actually doing a podcast, I don't have anything crazy for that. Editing software, I do a lot of that in Riverside unless I have to send it out. Opus Clip is another great way to find short clips inside of a podcast form. So if you've never used Opus Clip, it's pretty great. The free version is pretty decent as well. I think you get like 3 hours a month there to upload as well. So that's a pretty awesome software from like an AI perspective to make the editing faster, if that's not something you're really into. But yeah, those I think are everything. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I'm missing. I don't think so. If you have any questions around any of that, or you're just not sure what you need to start with, you can certainly reach out to me through my link tree and find me and shoot me a message. But the main things with the podcast and what I wanted to start is I wanted to promote my company, wanted to promote myself, which does promote my company. I wanted to learn from other people, and I wanted to become a better conversationist and connect with people. Those are like the 5 main things. So if any of those things ring true for you, and you think that you're like, I'm really like, I'm close and I think I want to do this, but I'm totally not sure. Those were like my 5 kind of whys. And it's been really good. It's been surprisingly more enjoyable than I thought it was going to be. The hardest part, I think, out of the gate is finding guests. So I thought I had a section in here. I had a section in here on that. So know that early on, you're going to have to rely on friends, family, coworkers, connections, whatever. You're going to have to reach out to people like that you may have connections with. If you don't have a lot of connections, this could get a little bit difficult as well. So guess starting out, you're just going to, ask people and ask for favors sometimes. And then it kind of kicks off. And once you get, a couple content or a couple ideas, people will realize and you can kind of get the ball rolling. So, I'm scheduled about a month out, I would say, with guests. And I have, probably 2 a week for the next, 4 to 6 weeks, which is great because then that just adds to my backlog because I'm only releasing 1 episode at a time. But just realize the guesting is a little tough at the beginning. You're going to get some no's, you're going to get some no thank yous, you're going to get some not going to happen. I even got a person who said that I have to pay them to be on a guest because they were a bigger content creator, which is totally fine. I get that. That's just not something I'm into that I want to go down right now. So, shoot your shot. Certainly, if it's someone that you don't think would be interested, just ask. All they can do is say no, so it's not that big of a deal. And if you have your Google guest form set up and you have that link available on your Linktree or on your socials, people may sign up. I remember the day I was so excited when someone signed up that I didn't actually know who they were. I was super pumped because it's like, okay, this person is only taking this opportunity to sit down with me because they saw my content and connected with it with other podcast stuff, which was really cool. So that was really super exciting. So guests at the beginning are tough. You're just going to have to ask for some favors and just walk down that road. Just ask people. And that's kind of what it is. Everything else beyond that, from the editing standpoint, I do get some help on some of that. But you can also use, if you don't have help, just use AI from that standpoint to, like Opus Clip, like I talked about, to take care of some of that. The other thing, I had one other thing I wanted to talk about. Now I don't remember. Apparently my notes were not very good. Thought I had something. I did have something just a second ago. Anyway, I don't know what it was, but yeah, so I started this 19th episode, connections. It's really cool. Once again, didn't think I would like it as much as I do. I'm enjoying the social aspect of being able to be social and networking in my own space and controlling that, which I really appreciate. And if it's something you are interested in, you have questions about, you can certainly reach out to me and I'll try to answer anything that I've ran into so far. Obviously, only 19 episodes. Don't know everything. Don't know what I'm going to run into in the future, but virtual podcast versus being in person is obviously quite different. So if you are going to do it in person, just realize it's going to limit also the pool of guests that you're going to be able to pull through. That's why I wanted to stay virtual as well, because I wanted to have the broadest net possible to never run out of guests. The main thing that I think is the hardest thing is to make sure you keep finding guests so you don't fizzle out. I heard a stat on one of them that once you get past your 11 episode, you've like made it over the hump. So that's pretty cool. So just get your first 10 or 11 done and then just kind of keep on rolling. Just stay ahead. That's the other one. Plan ahead with your calendar. Send calendar links out with all of your stuff when you're putting podcast guests together, so that you have that all on a calendar, so that when people come to you or fill out a guest form, you can reach out to them and tell them what weeks you are out, and just keep kind of knocking them down. Just keep putting those guests out there and logging them in. If you have guests cancel, you will, because life happens and that's okay. Maybe just try a solo pod like this. Talk about something that you're interested in or you think may help other people, and then do a short solo pod when you can fill in the gaps of when maybe guests couldn't make it or they had to move dates or anything like that. That happens, and that's totally fine. I got worried when guests were originally, I had another week, I think, where I had 2 guests cancel as well. And then that was my first solo pod episode. Then I thought, I was like, why don't I just do a solo pod and see what happens? So, yeah, just fill it in with stuff you're passionate about and don't worry about it, and just keep ticking along and just keep putting out one episode on whatever consistency you want to. Just don't overcommit and underdeliver. Put out whatever you say you're going to put out, and just stay working ahead and see if you enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it and you started it and you don't end up liking it, that's totally fine too. You don't have to, like, I had a podcast before this one that I ended up and stopped doing just because it wasn't enjoyable in that format. That's totally fine. It's not a big deal. Just try something and see if you end up liking it, because I think it's pretty cool. The connections I've made already so far and the people I've already met that I didn't know, and hearing their stories or hearing coworkers' passions outside of work has been really fascinating and really rewarding. So that is what I've learned so far as starting a podcast as a CEO. And once again, if you have any questions, certainly check me out. You can shoot me a link or shoot me a DM wherever on any of my socials to ask any questions. But I think that's it. Little 30-minute podcast, short one for you. Hopefully this was helpful. If you like these solo pods, let me know, because I don't know if anybody does. All right, we'll catch you in the next one.